I'm Therese Crowley on Good Morning America Radio, and we talked with our parenting contributor Ann Plachette Murphy about this new trend called cross-nursing. Cross-nursing, I think it's the name. The name is a little off-putting because the first thing you think is cross-dressing, and it makes it sound like something that's not quite right. But how is this different from the old trend of wet nursing?
Well, it actually isn't very different, and in fact, the two women we profiled, one of them is basically acting as a very part-time. She only does this when she's babysitting the other woman's child, wet nurse, because she has a 2-year-old whom she nurses. I'm sorry, the names get kind of confusing. Let me put some names to this. Morgan has a 2-year-old, and she breastfeeds her 2-year-old and also her best friend's 7-month-old. But her best friend Sarah, who has the 7-month-old, does not nurse her 2-year-old. If you follow me, does not nurse Morgan's 2-year-old. So that in that sense, it's not really cross nursing. It's more what you're describing. Wet nurses are. Actually, there still are wet nurses. There are agencies where in the list of personnel that you can hire, childcare provider, wet nurse, housekeeper. So you can actually still find wet nurses.
Well, when we think of the term wet nurse, I think we think of the Old South, and we think of,
it's been around. You're right. This dates back to years ago when, frankly, a lot of women died in childbirth. And a baby would starve to death. There was no formula. And so, in fact, wet nursing has been going on for centuries.
So when did that actually die off? Was it after the 40s or 50s, or when baby formula was invented?
Well, obviously, baby formula had a huge impact on both the fact that wet nursing was not really something that was accessible. The other thing about wet nursing is that, although I'm hardly an expert on this, is that it was unseemly for a woman to be seen nursing. And so, in fact, it was very much part of the culture of many, many cultures, especially in Europe, Western cultures, to hand the baby off to someone who would do that for you. Now, of course, we don't need it in that way, except that these women believe very strongly that if they are going to commit to breastfeeding their children, that the best thing is their own milk. If the baby will not take a bottle of expressed milk, that they would rather have a very healthy friend nurse the baby than give them formula.
Well, it's an interesting bond between friends, between a baby and a close woman who's not their mother. A very interesting trend, and so many women are so possessive of their children. Would some people be too possessive to do this?
I don't know if possessiveness. I think the big issue is that for women who breastfeed and for those who don't, and for all of us, breastfeeding, at least in this culture, is complicated because it has both the nutritional, functional, practical aspect to it. You're feeding your baby the best milk you can. And there is something very sentimental, romanticized about it. And of course, breasts in this culture are highly sexualized. And so we're not as comfortable with breastfeeding and in general as many other cultures are. So I think what becomes slightly off-putting when people heard about this story, and people went, and the poll that was done in Baby Talk magazine, the vast majority of those readers thought it was disgusting or weird. And I think that, again, really has to do with our attitude towards breastfeeding in general. And then if you add somebody else's breasts to the mix, it suddenly sounds, like something not only would you not want to do, but you kind of think it's not so cool that they're doing it. And if you are going to do this, the most important thing is to realize it's like giving a child a blood transfusion. They're all the benefits, the antibodies that a mother confers on her baby are highly positive for the baby's development, which is why breast is best. And that applies to a healthy friend or a healthy sister. They know that her antibodies will be transferred to the baby, but so will anything that she's carrying that you wouldn't want your baby to have. And so that's why breast milk banks are popular, and in fact they're approved by La Leche League because all of the milk is screened.
I'm Therese Crowley, and you're listening to Good